Good to see you here. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday and your Father's Day with us. Welcome to everyone tuning in online. Listen, I'm proud of all of you. I'm always proud of everyone here, but there's a specific group in the room that I'm especially proud of this morning. Can you raise your hand if you're a parent of toddlers? Any parent of toddlers in the room? Just raise your hand, be proud of it, own it, right? All right, here's why I'm especially proud of you. You're here. You made it. You are sitting in a seat. Some of you came in a little late, but that's okay. I'm not going to point you out that corner. But you're here. You made it and you're sitting in the room. I myself get the privilege of being a parent to two toddler boys. And here's what I've learned about parents of toddlers. If you see a parent and their toddlers come in on a Sunday morning and they are early and they have hair brushed and they have clothes on and there's smiles happening, they have won a lot of battles that morning. They are doing fantastic. It has been hard-earned. It was not given to them. They have just had one of those mornings where they have defeated it against all odds. And then others of you, you rolled in this morning like we sometimes roll in, and there's stains already on their shirt, even though you didn't give them anything in the car seat. So like, where did those even come from? You have one of yours, your oldest, in two left shoes. These are just examples. I didn't do this, okay? Don't listen to my wife. Two left shoes, there is hair's not brushed. There's still tears on you, not on them, but you're still dealing with it. If you see those parents, give them some love because they also had a lot of battles. They're just losing a lot, okay? But they are still making ground, and they are here, and they need some extra care and support because we all know what some of those are like. So I'm just proud of toddler parents. You are here, and you have done it. So congratulations. Here's one of the things we're learning right now. Every season has its own, difficulties, of course, and I can only speak to the one that we're in. And uniquely right now, a situation that I wasn't prepared for was my toddlers learning to share. Okay, way bigger of a battle than I expected that to be, because logically sharing makes sense. So I don't understand why they can't. And yet they continue to fight over not just the fact that they want the same toy. That's not really it. They just want whatever the other one has. Doesn't matter what it is, all right? They just want whatever the other one has. So we thought we would solve this. They always argue over their sippy cups. So we bought them identical sippy cups and didn't work. They now just fight over which one gets. I mean, it's astounding. Whatever the other one has, that's just what they want. In fact, my youngest will pick up a toy that my oldest has forgotten about, doesn't care about, will never play with, and all of a sudden, my oldest is locked on. That's not what I want. I will die to get that thing in my possession. And that's what he believes. And we try and get them to share and take turns. And, I've explained the take turns thing a few times. And my oldest has loved to say, well, that's not fair. That's not fair, taking turns. And I've tried to reason with him, tried to explain equity and how things work, and he's just not getting it. So he's really set on it's just not fair. Now, I'm glad we don't do this anymore, right? As we grow into adulthood, we understand people have things that we don't. We're not entitled to everything, and so it just totally makes sense. Not everything is going to be fair. We've outgrown that, right? And so, in fact, to prove it, I've done something really special because I want to be your favorite communicator, and I brought candy for everyone in the room. So there's actually in the seat back in front of you. If you will just reach in there, you can move on a Sunday. Reach in there and grab a piece of candy. I have Dove chocolates. I have Reese's. There's some Snickers in there. Just go ahead, grab that piece in front of you. There's some movement in the room. Some people aren't seeing anything. Some people are kind of checking empty seats. For those online, let me just fill you into what's happening in the room. I didn't give everybody candy, but some of the seats have them. And here's what's happening in the room. It's online, you got to hear this. What's happening is 10 seconds ago, all these people were happy. And now you hate your neighbor who was a stranger. You don't even know them, and you hate them now. Some of you are going to fight with your spouse on the way home because they made you move down a seat. And that's where you got stuck. This is kind of a silly illustration. I mean, not for some. Some of you are actually upset. But I think at some level, we can all agree on this. We have a tendency, all of us, to compare ourselves against those around us. We have this tendency. I think it's in each individual. where we look to our right and we look to our left and we see what they have and we just can't help but kind of feel it's not fair. And so I don't actually think we've outgrown it. I think that we handle it different, right? We don't scream and throw a tantrum, hopefully not. But maybe we handle it in different ways. Maybe we begin to grow a little bitter towards somebody. Maybe we begin to distance ourselves from someone who has more, even though they were a friend, and now we just feel like there's this awkwardness between us. Maybe we really try and stick it to them and we stop liking their posts on social media. We don't unfollow them because we want to see when they fail, but we'll unlike their post for a second. We maybe begin to talk bad about them. Not even, blatantly at first, but subtle. I make these little remarks like, oh, wow, did you see so-and-so bought another car? Or we begin maybe to chase what they have. And chase what they have in such a way that we just want what they have, and so we will begin to maybe cut corners. We'll go into debt to become more like them. We'll say things like, I'm used to in the South. I know Florida isn't really part of the South, but I'm from Georgia, and they would say things like, do you see our kids? Bless their heart. And it's not as good as it sounds. That's really not what they mean. Or maybe even the opposite takes place, and we begin to look at other people who have less than us, and we begin to feel superior about ourselves and act entitled around what we have. And Paul in the New Testament, he had a lot to say about comparison, this idea of looking around and comparing ourselves to other people. And if there was anyone who could claim not fair, it was Paul. I mean, Paul started off, he had it all. He had influence, he had wealth, he had power, he had everything he could have wanted, he had a reputation, he had success, he was the top of his field and career. But he had built it on destroying the name of Jesus. In fact, he would murder Christians who claimed the name of Jesus. In his mind, he wanted to end sort of this cult following of this guy who showed up and claimed to be God, and people began to follow after him. And so their answer was just to kill the leader, right? Because that's what happened to every other cult. You can kind of get rid of it if you just kill the leader. But the opposite began to happen. And as they killed Jesus and they thought it was over, people began to run back into the streets and claim that they saw him again. Hundreds of eyewitnesses, how the account of Jesus coming back to life was built, not just because something was read, but because people began to say, this is my story, this is what happened. And people who were running scared were now running back into the streets proclaiming that they saw him again. They believed he is who he said he was, which infuriated Paul. How could this be? And so they thought, well, now we just have to kill anyone who would claim this name of Jesus. And they were pretty good at doing it. He was on his way to ending the Christian church. It would have never been in our history books. And then something happened. Paul would claim, it's his story, he would claim he also saw Jesus after he died. And so he would give up everything. He would give up his affluence. He would give up his wealth. He would give up his power. He would end his reputation. And he would trade it all in for a life to now be just like the people he was persecuting and just like the ones he was torturing. A life in and out of jail, a life on the run, and his responsibility for why he would do this was simply, I just believe now in Jesus that he is who he said he was. This was Paul. And so if he could say not fair, he's living a life of not fair. And yet when he's talking to other Christians, and he's kind of walking them through this tendency that we all have, here's what he says in 2 Corinthians 10:12. He says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. Because when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. Can you say not wise with me one more time? They are not wise. In other words, they're dumb. Paul's going, this way of measuring your life, there's ways you can figure out if you're successful, if you're happy, if you're healthy, if you're whole, if you're healed. That's all great. But the measurement you use, if that is your measurement, to look to your right and to your left and to look at other human beings and to figure out where you stack, if that's where you find happiness, if that's where you're going to try and find fulfillment, it is a dumb endeavor. That is a dumb measurement to use for how you can actually begin to measure your life. And here's why I think Paul would say this, and I think it's the truth that's still true for us today. Comparison will always distract us from a full life. It will always be a distraction to the full life that we have in front of us, the full life that Jesus has offered us into. And maybe you didn't even see that as a distraction. Maybe it's not when you heard this series and we're gonna go over some things that distract you. I mean, there were some obvious ones in there, but maybe you didn't even feel like or realize that the fact that you were constantly looking to everybody else and feeling either good or bad about yourself in comparison was actually holding you back from the kind of life that you really wanna live. Because if you think about it, some of the things I just mentioned a second ago that comparison can tend to do, it might lead us to a life of jealousy, a life of bitterness, a life of distancing ourselves from people around us for no other reason but the fact that they have more. A life maybe that begins to tend toward gossip and how we speak negatively about other people. Or a life of superiority and feeling entitled. And all of them stand in complete opposition to the type of life that Jesus offers us. The type of life that what Jesus would say, he wants you to have peace. This ability to just be at peace and to have contentment. Ability to be at peace with yourself. To not just be constantly feeling like you're not enough or not measuring up, but to be happy. Not that you don't have goals and things you want to grow in, but at least the ability to kind of sit present in your life and to appreciate what you have. And the ability to be at peace with others. To then be able to be so content in who God has made you and how Jesus loves you that you can begin to love other people and other people who look different than you, other people who are just maybe could even be your enemies, that you would even be able to love them. That you would be able to have contentment and peace in your relationships with one another, that there wouldn't be bitterness causing you to not have a relationship with someone. All of the ways of Jesus stand in stark comparison to what can happen in our lives if we can't stop looking to our right and to our left. And so I think the reason this can be so fatal for our futures and our relationships is that comparison kills contentment. Every time. If your hope is to be content in your life, and I mean content is in that ability to find that peace. Again, not that you don't have future endeavors, but the ability to sit present in your life and find fulfillment, and find joy, and be able to face the next day knowing that you have a purpose and there's significance to your life and what's happening next. If that's what you want, and I think most of us would say in some level, Christ follower or not, we're after that. Comparison will continue to kill any chance that we have to achieve it. And here's why. When we compare, we sort of take this blank canvas of what we hope our life to be. So we sort of hold up this canvas and we go, okay, I'm gonna build out my ideal life. I'm gonna do it by looking at the best of everyone else. So I'm gonna take their vacations because they're just always posting the most amazing pictures, and I don't know how they got that kind of PTO, but that would be incredible. So I'm gonna put that there. I want their vacations, and man, if I could have their body, because gosh, I'm over here eating kale chips and like nothing's happening, and yet they don't get off the couch, and how is that possible? So I want their body and their cars. If I could have their cars, because my truck, the windows don't even move on it, and so their cars, that'd be great. And then if I could have their kids, because mine, and so I could have their kids, and what we end up with is this picture in front of us. Everyone's best. And that's what we aspire to. And that's now our goal. And you will never be content with anything that you have because your goal is impossible. Your goal is impossible because you've built it on the best of everyone else that you've seen. And it's not only just impossible for you, it's not possible for anyone. No one has the best of everyone's life. And so come on, it's no wonder we can sit back and feel like we just are never going to be a good enough parent, are never going to be a good enough friend, are never going to have enough money, are never going to be in the good enough spot, because the thing we are shooting for will always leave us discontent because it's just not even real. And then let's be honest. In Paul's day, the people they had to compare themselves with were literally the people who were around them. They'd walk out of the house, look to their right and their left, and that's who they could compare to. And today, with social media, we get to compare to every single human who's ever lived. That's who we get to compare to. And so we get to look at the best of truly everyone on the planet. We get to see the best parenting ever happened, and the most money spent, and the nicest houses, and the best travels. And we take all of that, and then how can we not feel less than holding that up as our standard for what we wish we could achieve? And then here's just the truth. You know that 90% of that is fake anyways? It's fake. It's paid for by detergent companies who want that family to look like they have a clean house. And so they are getting paid to post the best moments, the happiest moments with their kids. And when their kids lose it over sippy cups, they're not posting that because that's not helping that company make money. And so here's what's crazy. We are holding up an already idealized picture of the best of everyone's life, and most of it's paid for by a company. It's not real for them. Their kids are never that behaved. It's why they cut off the clip a little early, because you don't want to see what happened after that. And then no wonder, because we will spend more time, and some of us, it's just the reality. We spend more time in our lives comparing maybe than anything else we do. And we just sit, and we feel bad, and we feel like a failure, we feel like everyone else has figured it out. But it's because you're chasing something impossible. And because you're chasing something impossible, you're missing what you have. I think this is just going to be a truth that we have to come to grips with. There will always be someone with more. Always. Hate to burst your bubble. You're not going to arrive. You're not going to make it. We always sort of go, well, if I could just be there, if I could just have that, there I'll find happiness, there I'll have contentment. It's sort of a losing game because once you get there, once you make more money, someone to your right and to your left will have more. Once you get to that ideal body in your mind right now, there will be someone else to your right and to your left at the gym, whatever, who has more muscles than you. You will get to that spot with your kids where you're like, I've kind of finally figured some stuff out, and you will look to your right and to your left, and there will be a smarter kid. You will always, if we do not stop looking to our right and to our left as our measurement, we will never feel content with what we have, and there will always be someone who has more. And then here's the other truth. That a lot of times we look at something, and even not the paid for by ad stuff, but the real things that people have achieved. And we look at their life, and we see what they have, and we just begin to feel like we're defeated before we even start trying. Because, well, look what they have in front of us. And can I just tell you some of what we don't see? Because what you don't see when you see just that person and what they're doing and their success, you might not be seeing the 10, 20, 30 years worth of hard work that they've put behind it, the difficult road it's been, the challenges that they've overcome. Maybe they were even farther back from where you are currently, and yet all you do is you compare your beginning to their end, and you feel like you shouldn't even start. You feel like a failure from the get-go. You feel like I can't even begin to move forward on finances or begin to move forward in my faith journey or begin to move forward in my health experience, all because these people are where they're at. And yet it's not fair to you to be comparing where you're starting at and where they've been for 20, 30 years. So stop discounting yourself. There's just always going to be someone with more. That cannot be our measurement. In the words of Paul, it's dumb. And then here's the maybe more difficult piece to swallow. Not only are you paying consequences, and I think you are, but I think those around you are also paying consequences when we do this. And here's what I mean. There's a guy you might have heard of in the Old Testament. His name was David. And David started out as a shepherd. He eventually became a king. But in between that time, he worked for another king named Saul. And Saul and David had a pretty good relationship. And Saul, he had it all. I mean, he had wealth, he had influence, he had power, and then he was relatively well-liked. So he had the people on his side. So he had a great potential ahead of him. And then David comes along. And for Saul, David at first, this was a great relationship because David actually, working alongside his army, would defeat Goliath. Right? He would take out this giant that's been torturing his people, and Saul gets word of this, and so he promotes David. He says, this is a great thing. Your win is my win for our kingdom. I'm just so thankful to have someone like you on my side as an ally on our team. And 1 Samuel even records this type of relationship. It says this, whenever mission Saul went on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. So he was impressed by him. We see a mutually beneficial relationship begin to take place. But then there's one moment that happens that would begin to change everything in their relationship. It says this. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and with dancing and with joyful songs and with timbrels and with lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And in a moment, Saul would go from content to maybe even enjoying the relationship he had with David to it's not fair. One moment. Didn't even seem like a big deal. Maybe it wasn't even something that he had intended to do, but it was this one moment that changed how he saw everything. And maybe you've had one of these. This is that moment where they got the promotion. I mean, them? Have they not seen everything I've been doing? And they always get that anyways, and I've seen them cut corners, and yet most of that was my work. They're getting that? And everything changes. Or they got the girl? I mean, them? Have you seen them? They got the girl? Or the moment that their kid gets into school that your kid wanted to get into. And they tell you about it and you're trying to be excited for them. Or the moment that this family posts another happy announcement. And it's in one moment where mutual celebration, mutual friendship, maybe even allies in life begin to shift to anger, resentment. You spin to go, it's not fair. Here's what did to Saul. Next line, and from that time on, don't miss this. From that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. Saul made the decision, maybe not even intentionally, maybe subtly, maybe it was not even, he didn't even notice that it was happening. It was just a distraction, but he began to shift his gaze from his purpose, who he was, what he was called to, onto another human being. He began to be distracted by comparison. Although it doesn't seem like the big enough distraction to take someone out. It does, and it did for Saul. You know the story, to fast forward a little bit, Saul would begin to make a series of compromises, even to himself and morally, for what he believed. He would begin to manipulate. He would begin to hurt people and abuse people when that hadn't been his original track record. And again, he didn't even see it. He's just so focused on David. Eventually, he attempts to murder David, going farther than he ever thought he would go. This focus on David, not his own purpose, began to eventually destroy his reputation, destroy his relationships, destroy his following. He loses his entire kingdom. He loses really who he is and dies a pretty sad death and then is replaced by David. Distraction. And I just wonder, just to pose the question, could we be losing more than we think by comparing? Could we be, because we are so obsessed with those to our right and to our left, could we maybe even be giving up a little bit of what we know to be right, what we know to be true about ourselves? Could we be undermining our own integrity in order to achieve and to have? It's not happening overnight, but maybe slowly. Are we beginning to change ourselves to fit a mold that's not even who we're supposed to be? And then like Saul's story, are we possibly killing relationships? Are we maybe even putting pressure on the people around us, like our kids and our spouses, for them to be perfect so that we can have the ideal family, be the ideal parent, have the ideal kids? Are we subtly hurting people around us because we can't focus on what's in front of us, just what's in front of everybody else? And then maybe a different question. Are there people like Saul that you have made an enemy unnecessarily. In fact, they could have been your ally. They could have been someone who helped you in life. They could have been someone who you did life alongside, and maybe you would have a mutual, beneficial relationship. And yet, just because of something they were given, or they received, or they even maybe worked for, you've made them an enemy unintentionally. You've now given up your effort and your energy and your time to hate them, to hope to see them fail. I don't think we can afford to keep being distracted by comparison. I think it's just subtle enough, and I think it's just destructive enough to maybe even be the thing that our culture is dealing with the most, that is taking us away from where we are meant to be. It is undermining our happiness. It is undermining our relationships. It is undermining our future. And it is undermining the kind of Christ follower that he has called us to be. And so what I want to offer, and I wish these were more simple, but I want to offer 3 habits. 3 habits that I think we can combat comparison with. And here's why I say habits. I wish this was one and done. I wish this was overnight. I wish we could just tomorrow pray, God, help me stop comparing, and then we just never feel insecure another day of our life. I don't know if that's possible, but what I do know about a habit is that it's going to take time to override something that we've been spending time in. So for many of us, we've been comparing for so long we didn't even know it. In fact, for many of us, especially if you grew up in the age of the internet, you've been comparing since day one. You've been comparing since you were a student or a kid. And for some of us, it's just been so ingrained in our default and how we live life and how we wake up and immediately check social media and feel bad about ourselves before 7 a.m. Like we've just so ingrained ourselves in this that it is going to take work. It's going to take effort to rewire our brains. And so again, wish I could just give you 3 simple steps. I don't have that. I can give you 3 habits that I think if you make steps, and if you work in a routine, and if you work into a schedule, maybe we can begin to take some ground against this, okay? So here's the first one. I think we need to celebrate others. And I mean truly celebrate others. All right, I don't mean sarcastically celebrate them, all right? Like, oh, wow, look, they got another vacation, good for them, right? Don't mean that. But what would it look like to truly share happiness for someone else when they get something that maybe even you wanted? And it doesn't have to start out loud, and it doesn't have to start publicly. In fact, I might even suggest that you start with praying this, because the first few times you pray for someone that has more than you and that you're envious of, it's going to feel very forced, and you're going to do it through your teeth, and you might say, bless their heart at first, and that's okay, and God can take it. And I would just start there, because what I think you might begin to see is as you do that, and as you develop a habit of celebrating the people around you in your life, you might begin to see them the way that God sees them, as people made in his image, as people, yes, with some great things happening to them, but also with some struggles, and also with some difficulties, and also with some things that you have that they wish they could have. And so as you begin to see them as a human and as a person, and you begin to celebrate the things that are happening to them, maybe just even in your own heart at first, you might begin to see your heart change. If it's consistent, you might begin to actually feel different. Feel forced at first. But I think sometimes that's where God can start. And then who knows, maybe that moves its way into publicly encouraging them and saying something nice to their face. Maybe it looks like liking their Instagram post. I know that's a crazy step, but maybe just there. We need to celebrate others around us. Second thing is we need to practice gratitude. Here's why I say that. I think that a lot of comparison happens because we are taking our focus away from what's in front of us, and we are focusing on what someone else has to our right or to our left. And so if that's where comparison takes place, because we're always looking at what they have, what if we shifted that focus back to what's in front of us? And so many of us, we're missing the things that God has given us, the incredible miracles that are right in front of us that we can't see because we only see their house and their Instagram and their kids. And what would it look like to begin to focus back? I've had to even do this week. We've just had a rough couple of weeks, my wife and I, and it's little things, right? But they begin to pile up, and you know what this is like. And it was financial setbacks, and then there was a death in the family, and then I got into a car accident, but now insurance isn't paying, and it's just little things, right? But it didn't feel little in the moment, right? I just kind of feel like everything's happening all at once, and I'd started to honestly be a little just overwhelmed. And I had to actually sit down. Here's what I would suggest you do. If you want to develop a habit of it, maybe even begin to write it out. I mean, literally write down. There's something about it, for me at least. It's visual, it's tangible, and I can just see it in front of me. It will take a couple minutes a day. As I begin to write down all the things I'm thankful for, the kids were in the car and they weren't hurt and everyone's fine, and just the different things that I should be thankful for, the circle that we have around us, the fact that the family was all able to come together even through that death and celebrate an amazing life. And as I began to write these things, it just made the other things seem smaller. I just wonder, I mean, for my life, I would love to start there every day. Instead of starting on scrolling, and I'm going to be the first to admit, my phone's by my bed. It sometimes is the first thing that I get on. But I mean, what if instead of starting our morning by, I wish I had that, we'll never have that, look at that great parent, wow, their kids don't throw tantrums, mine's already throwing one, I haven't even been into his room yet. And if instead, a couple minutes, we just go, God, I'm so thankful for the people that you've put in my life, the job I have, this home, this whatever it is, the fact that I'm walking into my kid's room and they have a room and a bed. I don't know what it is. But don't miss what you have because you're focused on all the things that you don't. You'll never find contentment there. And the last thing, you have to know your value. Here's why I say that. Because I think maybe overwhelmingly in our culture, we spend so much of our time seeing what we aren't, feeling like we aren't enough, and feeling like we don't measure up, and feeling like we'll never be as good as X, Y, or Z, or have it all together like them, or be a success like they are. We begin to undervalue who we actually are. We begin to undervalue the gift set that you have. You begin to undervalue the personality that you've been given. You begin to undervalue your life experience and what you've learned, how you can even impact others. You begin to devalue yourself. Maybe you didn't even realize it. Maybe you didn't see it. But it's that subtle thing in the back of your mind consistently throughout the day that says, I am just not good enough. And I think this is such a powerful place we have to start, because when you know who you are, that's when you know who you don't have to be. It has got to start at a place of knowing who you are. And can I just say this? You have been uniquely designed for a reason. You've been built the way that you are for a reason. You have been given a unique purpose in front of you that no one else has and no one else can fulfill. The person to your right and to your left, they can't fulfill your purpose. It's for you. In fact, someone needs to hear this. Your family doesn't need that parent that you're trying to be. Your family needs you. Your spouse doesn't need that person that you're trying to become. They need you. Your church, your community, they don't need that thing you're striving for. They need who you are. Your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your circumstances, the unique things that you've been through, maybe even the hurts and the ways that you've processed through them in life. That is what the people around you need from you. That is what you need from you. And until we can stop focusing on what everyone else has, we will miss what God has given us. And so I'd like to close by just kind of starting there. And I know there's not everyone in the room is a Christ follower. There's questions about faith. There's people trying to figure this out. And I just like to kind of start at what I believe God says about us. What I believe God says about you specifically. And I think for those of us in the room, maybe it's just a good reminder. Because once we really know who we are, then we can decipher through who we're becoming. And so I just want you to know that when God looks at you, he doesn't see a mistake. He doesn't see a mess. He calls you his workmanship, which would mean a masterpiece. He has designed you and developed you exactly the way that you are. He is proud of who he's created. He's obsessed with who he's created. And it's not a mistake that's going to change that. It's not a moment in time that's going to throw you out of his love. In fact, he proved that by dying in your place, knowing all the mistakes you would make, knowing all the mess that would follow you in years to come. But he would know, I am obsessed with my creation. They are made in my image. And I'm going to die in their place so that they could have a purpose, that they could have fulfillment, that they wouldn't be tied to any mistake or misstep that they make. But instead, I could have a relationship with them. He wants so desperately to walk with you in this life, through the difficulties, through the mess, to be with you so that you are never alone, so that you can help figure out your unique purpose, a purpose and a plan that he has designed specifically for you. That is his heart for you. What if we just started there? What if we deleted social media and just thought about that every day? I think it would begin to change everything. And then, this is so beautiful. He then calls people who have accepted that reality. This has all been Jesus dying in my place and offering me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. To then come alongside one another and to love like crazy even when it's not deserved or earned. And to treat one another in that same way. And to not worry about comparing and bitterness and jealousy and making people enemies unnecessarily, but doing life together. That's what he's called us to. And so I just want to end in praying for those of us maybe in the room like me who have realized that this is a bigger distraction than we like to admit, and that we have a lot of work to do. And it's not going to be easy. And thankfully we have each other and we have our small groups and we have those around us to support us. But I want to pray for those of us who want to commit to this, to going, I'm giving up too much and I've got to take this back. So let me pray for us. God, I thank you for everyone in the room. I thank you for their unique skill sets and their life stories and just their different personalities and different abilities, and God, the way that you just designed a beautiful church. And God, it breaks my heart that so many of us miss that because of what we're not, or what we wish we had. And so God, I know that it's not coincidence that you're even speaking to us right now in the back of our minds, and it's not coincidence that anyone's in the room or listening online. I know that you are speaking to us because this is an area that you want to enter into. You want to help us, and it's evidence of your love even just in this moment, that we are not alone in this. And so God, I pray that you would help us. That you would help us do the difficult work of building in these habits into our lives. And that God, you would begin to do something very powerfully that might even change the trajectory of our futures, but that start in this moment. God, we thank you for your reminder. We thank you for your just amazing love. It's your name I pray. Amen.